In this special episode, we have an interview with Toby Charles, a legend from football commentating, especially in North America. And either you know Toby or you don't. If you do know him, you'll know what impact he's had on the game in North America and around the world. And if you don't know him, I think it'll be a pleasure to hear his voice and hear his stories about commentating on the great game from the 1960s to the 1970s and onwards. Okay, well, it's a great honour to have on the phone with us a man who makes me smile for two different reasons. First, he's a legend in the history of soccer on American television, and second, he's Welsh. Welcome, Toby Charles, to EPL Talk.
Thank you very much.
Well, Toby, I want to begin by asking, do you realise the enormous impression you've made on a generation of soccer fans in the United States who grew up watching and listening to your commentary on soccer made in Germany?
Well, actually, I discovered that, Chris, back in, I think it was 1978. That was my first visit to the United States. And we were already doing Soccer Made in Germany from the Deutsche Welle then, from Transtel, as it turned out, actually, Transtel in those days. And I received a few letters, and then I was in the States, as I was saying, and in New York with the people who were using at that time for Soccer Made in Germany for Channel 13, I think it was, in New York. And some people came to wanted to meet me, and then the same thing happened in California. And you know, it was fun. You know, I didn't realize that I had such a name in the U.S. You know, but because I'd never had a name before in anywhere else. But yeah, it was something very special, and that's the first time I realized it. And the second time I really sort of made an effort to get to know the American public was in 1982 when I was in New York, again for Channel 13, and doing the World Cup from Spain, obviously off tube. And then that became even more obvious, the fact that, you know, that through Soccer Made in Germany, that I did have a little name then as well. And I met people like Giorgio Chinaglia, who was with the Cosmos, and well, that was before 1982. I met him in '78 actually, and it's also Franz Beckenbauer and Pelé as well. And so, yeah, that was when I first realized it, and you know, it was very good for me. It made me feel good.
How did the show begin? Was that in '76?
Yeah, it was round about then. Yeah, we started doing. No, it was before that actually. The very first soccer telecast I did was in 1972. That was also for Transtel. That was within Transtel being the overseas television service for German television at that time. And the first game I ever did was for that was Germany against England, believe it or not, and West Germany, of course, in those days. And that was as a qualifier for the European Championships. And as we all now know that England lost. West Germany won their first for the first time in Wembley, and that was in I think it was 72. Yeah, it was end of 71 or beginning of 72. Anyway, when Gerd Muller got a goal, Uli Hoeneß got a goal, Gordon Banks was still in goal for England then, but anyway, West Germany won 3-1, I can remember that. And that was basically our first telecast for Soccer Made in Germany with the West German team. But then the Bundesliga came a couple of years after that, yeah. That was so, I mean, the exact, I don't know whether it was 76, but it was certainly after 72. But 72 was the very first telecast on German soccer, but because it was West Germany against England.
Now, how does a Welshman become associated with the Bundesliga?
Well, I was on a cricket tour of I was playing for Glamorgan Nomads, which is basically Glamorgan's second team, and we were on a cricket tour in Devon and Cornwall back in 1960, the summer of 1960. And there were a couple of attractive young ladies working at the hotel learning English that the team was staying at. And I got friendly with one of them, and she happened to come from Cologne. And I was in my first year as a school teacher then. And I decided that teaching was perhaps not the job for me, or certainly the pay wasn't in those days anyway.
Sure.
And she said, well, why don't you come over to Germany? And that's what I did. I went there. I landed in Cologne in New Year's Eve, 1960, December 1960, and then stayed over there, working first of all as an English teacher and also as a sports teacher at several gymnasium, what they call them over there, grammar schools, and then I did that until July 1962. And then the Deutsche Welle, the German overseas service, started up. It wasn't allowed to before that because of the stipulations after the war, but in 1962, July 1962, they were allowed to broadcast in foreign languages for them, of course. And I went along, had a voice test, got accepted, and obviously I'd loved sport all my life. I'd played sport and so on, and so the obvious thing was for me to get interested in sport, and then that's, how one thing led to the other. That I went into broadcasting and then into sports broadcasting.
Now, let's go back a little bit to when you were growing up in Wales, and you mentioned South Wales. What were your first memories of watching professional football matches there?
Well, not too much, actually, because we didn't have television when I was growing up in Wales. We didn't watch too much. Except, from the local team, my Usk team in a small town in Wales. So, I didn't see much football. I suppose my real first big memory, I think, was I was still at school then, obviously, was 1953, was Stan Matthews. I saw that game. That was on television. We didn't have a television, but some friends had one. And was Stan Matthews winning his first and only Cup Winners' Medal for Blackpool when Blackpool won the Cup in 1953. And then the following year, or was it the same? No, it was actually the same year. I saw that on television. Was the Magical Magyars, the Hungarians? Mm-hmm. At Wembley when they won 6-3 at Wembley, and that was England's first ever defeat at Wembley, never mind against West Germany, but against anybody. And, that was sort of football in those days from a different, or soccer as you call it in the United States, from a different planet then. And that was actually, I suppose, those two games were my first memories. But of actually local football, we never had it on television. I remember Newport County had a good team then, Wales had a good team. In 1954, they got to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. In fact, the only time they've ever been at the World Cup, and just lost against Brazil by 1-0 in not 1954, sorry, 1958 in Sweden. And that was a wonderful occasion as well because two of my second cousins were in the squad, John Charles and Mel Charles, and my father and the father of John and Mel were first cousins, so I was their second cousins, obviously, and so it was, it was great to hear that as well. But I didn't see that. I just heard it on the radio. I didn't see it on television either because I said at home we never had television. In fact, we didn't have television. Didn't even have electricity in those days, Chris. Never mind television. It was steam radio. Sure.
Now, of course, John Charles and Mel Charles, both legends. John going on to play in Italy and for Leeds United, and started his time at Swansea as a youth player there. But did you get a chance to kind of hang around John and Mel, and what were your impressions?
Not in those days, Chris. No, but I have a lovely story. It's a couple of years ago. Wales played West Germany in a friendly in the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff, and Wales won 1-0. Robert Earnshaw got the goal, and before the game they paraded the Welsh players who were still alive and who had played in the 1958 World Cup finals. And John and Mel were there, and so was Mel Hopkins and Terry Medwin and a few of the others, and they was actually staying in the same hotel at the Holiday Inn, just right next to the Millennium Stadium, the same hotel we were staying at. And my son was with me. And He's as big as I am. I'm about 6'2", 6'3", and he's about the same. And John and Mel were there as well, and it was wonderful. The first time I'd ever met them, actually, and it was wonderful to meet them. And for him, it was an even greater experience. And that he had the picture taken with John and Mel, and then Terry Medwin and Mel Hopkins and some of the others, and then that was a fantastic experience, especially for me, obviously, but also for him, that he'd met these famous, distant uncles of his, yeah.
Sure, absolutely, and definitely legends. Now, for those listeners who are a little bit too young to remember or never got a chance to watch Soccer Made in Germany, can you walk us through a typical episode and what it consisted of?
Well, we never did or very seldom did a game live. It was mostly the game was played on Saturday, then it was edited down to between 50 and 60 minutes, and then we did the commentary on those 50 or 60 minutes. Sometimes I did the game live and it was edited after that, but that was unusual. That was normally not the case. Normally, we'd decide which game we were going to take depending on the quality of the game, and if we got a goalless draw, then we left it out, and we'd take another game and edit that down to the 50 or 60 minutes, and then I'd do the commentary on that. But sometimes, as I was saying, also I did the commentary live on a couple of games, and they were edited down afterwards according to my commentary.
Okay.
No. But sorry, Chris, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, that we started that as I was saying, in the mid '70s, and then it continued, and it became, so popular over here. I was going to ask you why it became so popular, actually.
Yeah, well, for me personally, I grew up in South Wales and emigrated to America in 1984, and it was one of those things going from, of course, UK, going to America, and almost in a way expecting to see the same, television, the football on television, and really it was one of the very few shows, if any, that were on television. There was kind of the dark years of soccer in America, kind of, for me at least, kind of after the NASL and long before Major League Soccer. And it was part of it was just kind of the mystery of kind of being able to watch a match on a weekend on PBS, and then of course hearing your commentary, which was very vivid, and it was just I think a very nostalgic time. And of course at that time probably it was for a lot of people growing up in America, I think it was their opportunity to learn about the game, and also if they knew a little bit about the game, to learn more about it, whether it was the fans or the players, or the just the history really.
Well, Chris, what surprised me when I first came over here in 1978, as I was saying, and then also even later in 1982 when I did the World Cup and so on, is that German soccer, West German soccer as it was then, through Soccer Made in Germany was quite well known. All the German players were known over here and so on. Mm-hmm. But there was no English First Division soccer as it was then. First Division, not Premier League.
That's right.
And no Italian and no Spanish. Basically, certainly not in the English language channels anyway. And that you basically only had in West German soccer or Soccer Made in Germany. That was something that surprised me greatly.
Yeah, very much so. If you're lucky in different parts of the country, you might have been able to watch a little bit of Mexican football. That was maybe just, of course, in a totally different language, but at that point we didn't care.
No.
So in the 70s and 80s, it really was a golden period for German soccer and many famous players. Who for you were some of the players that graced Soccer Made in Germany that you admired?
Well, I was very fortunate, Chris, is that when I started commentating, I said in 1972 on German soccer, that was the golden era, if you would like to call it that, of West German soccer. You had your Beckenbauers, probably one of the finest, certainly the finest libero sweeper that I've ever seen anyway. And then you had probably the most prolific goal scorer ever, and that's Gerd Müller. And Gerd Müller, I mean, everybody talks about Pelé and so on. Of course, he's a fantastic player and so on. And, you even talk nowadays about Michael Owen and Ronaldo and so, but Gerd Müller scored over 60 goals. He scored 66 goals, I think it was, in 62 internationals. That's over a goal a game in internationals. And for me, he was by far the greatest goal scorer I've ever seen. He had a built-in radar. I can tell you that game I was mentioning, 1972, when West Germany beat England at Wembley 3-1. And Norman Hunter, I was talking to Norman Hunter after the game. We were in the bar after the game, and he was saying about Muller. He said he's incredible because he scored this goal. He said he had his back to the goal. Norman Hunter was shielding him. Gerd Müller had his back to the goal. He turned in one movement, hit the ball, and was already turning towards the halfway line and had his hands up to chip even before the ball went in the net. That's how certain he was that it was going to be a goal. And so, I mean, you know, he, as I was saying, for me, the most prolific goal scorer ever. But Sepp Maier, wonderful goalkeeper. Betty Folks, a terrier at right back. Paul Breitner at left back. These are all the German players, of course. Sure. And Rainer Bonhoff and Uli Hoeneß. And Erwin Kramer and Bernd Hölzenbein and some Jupp Heynckes from Borussia Mönchengladbach. There were so many of them, and you know this was really a super German team. And, you know, they won the European Championship 1972. They won the World Cup 1974, and you know. They were, and plus the fact that the foreigners they got in then, people like Alan Simonsen, the great little Dane I always called him, who played for Mönchengladbach, and Henning Jensen, another Dane who played for Mönchengladbach. The foreigners they got in then didn't cost what they cost today, and they were great players as well. And I remember in the 70s, all four semi-finalists in the UEFA Cup were all German teams. And the final was Frankfurt against Borussia Mönchengladbach, and Eintracht Frankfurt beat Gladbach. And, you know, but those days have long gone. But I was fortunate that, you know, that I was able to, I mean, I was so enthusiastic, probably through my broadcasting. I hope it sounded enthusiastic anyway. But I was so enthusiastic because they were such wonderful players, and you know, I could really enjoy watching them so much. It you know, it was enjoyable for me.
Absolutely. Now from those years in the 70s and 80s, do you remember any of your famous catchphrases from the show?
Oh dear, well, one of them was the Great Little Dane, wasn't it? That was Alan Simonsen, and I remember and then the other one was another one. Oh yeah, that was High, Wide, and Not So Handsome, I think, was another one I used then, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, but there was but I'll never forget a game, Fortuna Düsseldorf against Bayern Munich. And it was, Düsseldorf were leading something like about 6-2 or 6-1 or something like that. And the Bayern Munich coach at that time was the Hungarian, Julian Laurent. And there was a shot right on him, sticking his finger right up his nose. And I remember saying then, well, I don't know what he's looking for up there. I said, it can't be substitutes because he needs a few at the moment. But yeah, I mean, you know, I don't know. I think because the football was so good, I was always spontaneous, you know, and I said it was always enjoyable. It always made me feel good. Absolutely. You know, and but of course, you know, and unfortunately, those days are gone for the Bundesliga now, and internationally anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, what were the circumstances surrounding the demise of the show in 1988? I believe it was.
Sorry.
What were the circumstances surrounding the end of the show? I guess in 1988.
Oh, I think rights actually. As far as I know, it was television rights. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was the problem, that the DFL, the German Football League, wanted too much money or something. I think that was basically it. Yeah. I think plus the fact, of course, that you know, the Premier League came more and more into being, and now it's probably the number one league in the world, and it promotes itself so well, and all the stars are there. So I think that sort of went hand in hand, actually. That it was a question of rights, and the company I was working with didn't want to pay too much, and or so much. And plus the fact that that gradually the Bundesliga was losing out to other leagues, especially the Premier League.
Sure. Now, what are your memories from commentating the 1982 World Cup?
Sorry?
The 1982 World Cup in Spain. What are your memories from commentating that one for?
Well, that was a disappointing World Cup as far as I was concerned. There were great moments in it. From the Brazilians, for example, they were superb, but they didn't play tactically. I remember against Italy, all they needed was a draw, and they went ahead, and then Italy drew level, and the Brazilians went ahead again. And instead of trying to just hold on to their lead, they kept going for another goal, and the Italians then. I think it was Paolo Rossi got 3 goals in that game, and then won the game for Italy. And Italy, how the hell they got through from their group, because they only had the same number of points as Cameroon, but they scored 1 goal more as Cameroon, I think it was. But also, I've got some unpleasant memories, actually. There was the game between West Germany and Austria, and both teams... I think it was Algeria. Yeah, I think it was Algeria were in the same group, and they were playing later. But if West Germany beat Austria by 1-0, both teams would go through to the second group phase. And that's exactly what happened. I think it was Horst Rubisch got a goal for West Germany. After that, the ball sort of never left the center circle. They didn't try and score against each other, and that was so, that was anti-football. It was anti-soccer. It wasn't nice at all. And actually, since that World Cup, all the last group games now are played at the same time.
That's right.
That's all since then, actually, and that because that was such a fiddle. I was rather upset when West Germany got through to the final, but then they lost against Italy in the final. But they didn't deserve to, and I think Paul Breitner was captain then. But he said, well, if that's what we had to do, that's what we did, and the Austrians said the same, and that's it. They both went through.
Mm-hmm. Now after Soccer Made in Germany, where did you go from there?
Well, we still did Bundesliga soccer. But it wasn't called Soccer Made in Germany then, because Transtil didn't have the rights anymore. But I was still working and announcing Bundesliga soccer up until 3 years ago. Okay. And but I didn't know who promoted that over here in the States, or who broadcast it over here, and so on. So. I think it's on a channel called Goal now, I think, isn't it? Bundesliga Soccer.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and I did it for a while. I think, was it ESPN did it? I'm not quite sure. Anyway, but I mean, obviously I did it in Germany. I did the commentaries in Germany, and I never knew who actually broadcast it, rebroadcast it, or retelevised it over here.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, because I think for a while it was Fox Sports World, and then it became Fox Soccer Channel and Goal TV. So. But Fox actually don't do Bundesliga soccer anymore, do they? Not anymore. No. Goal TV has it now. So. Yeah.
And that's pay-per-view, is it?
Actually, it's cable. So yeah.
Oh, it's cable, is it? Oh.
Yeah, but special cable.
But of course, it clashes with the Premier League, doesn't it, all the time now?
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty much at the same time. So it's it's kind of a war.
I know they have a game on Friday evenings. I think now they've started that again in Germany. As I said, I packed in 2 years ago.
Right.
I still do the cup. Actually, I still do the German Cup matches.
Okay.
Simply and purely, it pays my flights over here, Chris, and plus the fact that it keeps the old grey cells ticking over a little bit,
Sure. Now, in doing the research for this interview, I found that one of the Globe Kicker football magazines had a little article about you and stated that you loved three things in life, and those were, quote, beer, women, and soccer, and not necessarily in that order.
Where do you get that from?
It was from a Globe Kicker, I guess.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not quite true, actually. No, being a Welshman, of course, I do love my beer. I've been married 4 times, so obviously I love women as well. And soccer, well, I love rugby as well, being a Welshman, as you can appreciate. Absolutely. But when I went to Germany, there was I played rugby over there, and I coached a rugby team over there as well later on. But obviously, couldn't make any money commentating on rugby matches in Germany. So, but I played soccer also as a kid, and I love soccer as well. But I love all sports basically, sure. And I've covered a couple of Olympic games, the 1972 games in Munich, for example, and track and field, the World Track and Field Championships in Dusseldorf and Stuttgart, and Davis Cup in Stuttgart and in Munich. But so I love all sports. Mm-hmm. But obviously in Germany, it's the soccer is a way of life, like rugby is in Wales, sort of thing. It's basically the same sort of thing. It's that you've got to be a soccer fan in Germany, and so that's one of the reasons that I went into broadcasting in soccer because there was no rugby available.
Sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Now, I've got some questions from a listener. His name is Ron Cruz, and his first question is, who's your favourite German club?
Oh, my favourite German club is Borussia Mönchengladbach. Always has been. I'll tell you why, too. They got promoted to the Bundesliga in 1965 together with Bayern Munich. They weren't founder members of the Bundesliga, which started in 1963. In fact, Hamburg is the only team that's been in the Bundesliga from the very beginnings in 1963 and are still in the Bundesliga, never been relegated. And that's why they call the last of the dinosaurs. Borussia Mönchengladbach and Bayern Munich got promoted to the Bundesliga in 1965, and obviously Bayern Munich have never been relegated since then. But Mönchengladbach, from the moment I watched them, they love to play attacking soccer. Mm-hmm. And they scored a lot of goals. You had the impression they'd rather win 5-4 than 1-0, Mm-hmm. And they played some wonderful football, especially in the 70s when they won the German Championship 5 times in the 70s. They won the UEFA Cup twice in the 70s. And they were a great team. That's when they had Bertie Folks and Jupp Heynckes and people like that. They were a wonderful attacking team. Bayern Munich were always, in those days, methodical. But Mönchengladbach played attacking soccer, and since then, I've loved them.
Sure. Now, the next question from Ron is, what's the greatest finish to a Bundesliga season?
Ooh, that's difficult. That is very difficult. I think it was in, let me think now, 1970, or was it early 80s? There was Cologne and Mönchengladbach were going both for the title, and I think it was 81, maybe 81, 80, 81. I'm not quite sure. It might have been 79. I can't remember now, to be honest. But that was wonderful. It was on the last day of the season. Both teams had to win. Mönchengladbach played Borussia Dortmund. I think it was in Dusseldorf, actually. They didn't play in their own stadium because it wasn't big enough, the Mönchengladbach stadium, so they played in Dusseldorf. And they beat Dortmund 12-0. Yeah, but at the same time, Cologne beat St. Pauli Hamburg by 5-0, and so got the championship. I think it was by 1 goal difference. That was incredible because I was upset, obviously, because Mönchengladbach scored 12 goals on the last day of the season. And a friend of mine who was a Cologne fan, he reckoned there was a bit of fiddle going on there. When a team wins 12-0 on the last day of the season.
Sure.
Yeah.
the next question from Ron is, what are your thoughts about video replay technology? Is that a yes or a no?
Oh, it's definitely a yes. It's got to be no. I mean, there's so much money involved. I would even take it a step further now that you may be able to challenge a call, like like you can in American football. You're saying it would slow the game down, but I mean, it just takes 20, 30 seconds. I mean, we see after slow-mos, we see that there have been, quite often a mistake made by, quite understandable, because the referee doesn't have the facilities that we have to watch it again. But, he gave a penalty when somebody took a dive or vice versa, and the refereeing assistant, used to be the linesman, puts his flag up for offside when it wasn't, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. And I think you should be able to have a couple of challenges, especially if the ball crossed the line or not in a goalmouth incident. Did it cross the line or didn't it cross the line? So I think there's so much money involved. I mean, especially, for example, in the European Champions League, you get a mistake there, the team goes out of it, and it can cost them millions and millions. In fact, I was reading in the paper the other day that if England didn't get through to the finals at the European Championships next year in Switzerland and Austria, that it would cost the industry total, like the economy, it cost them billions, never mind millions, because of the loss of revenue through the sale of memorabilia and things like that. So I think it has become such not just an important part of sport, but such a huge business that I think now that there must be perhaps even more video technology involved in the game. And I should think that that's like they can do in American football, that coaches or managers should be allowed a couple of challenges during a game as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are your thoughts about the level of officiating, say, in today's age versus back in the 70s and 80s? Has it improved or perhaps not?
I don't think it has, actually, but the reason being is that the game now is so much quicker than it was in the 70s or 80s. The players are so much quicker. I mean, going back a little earlier, Stan Matthews, for example, or Sir Stanley, as he became later, one of the greatest footballers, one of the greatest wingers the world has ever seen, probably, and certainly one of the nicest men I've ever spoken to, and I had the pleasure to interview him a couple of times, and a wonderful player. But he couldn't exist at his pace then. He couldn't exist in the world of football or world of soccer today because it's so much quicker and all the players are so much fitter and faster. And so the players have become fitter and faster. The game has become so much faster, but of course, I don't think the referees have become all that faster. So it is making it. I think it's far more difficult. Also, the attitude of the players on the pitch. We shouldn't forget that. That has made it a lot more difficult for the officials as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Now, the last question from Ron Cruz, the listener, he says, before the Bosman ruling, the Bundesliga and West German national team were arguably the strongest in the world for a good period of time in the 70s and 80s. How much has the Bosman rule hurt both?
I honestly don't think it's hurt West Germany any more than any other country, really. I think what's happened is that since then, the Germans are basically. I've lived there for over 40 or almost 50 years now, so I think I can fairly say that I know how they think and how they judge things. Is they haven't really moved with the times. The Bundesliga hasn't, and the DFB, the German FA, hasn't moved with the times in the way that other leagues have. They haven't become, shall I say, so financially minded as other leagues, especially the Premier League, of course. That is the prime example. So I don't think it had anything basically to do with the Bosman ruling. I know that's affected a lot of clubs that the players can leave after a certain time, but I don't think that's not the reason for the demise of the Bundesliga, and it hasn't certainly resulted in the demise of the German team. But let's not forget that last last year Germany finished third in the World Cup, and Jürgen Klinsmann did a fantastic job there. I wish England would take him, because he had players which were not in the same caliber as the England players. For example, he had two what I would call. Well, you got Michael Ballack, who was a world-class player. You've got Ben Schneider, who was a top international player. But otherwise, the players around him, he had a good goalkeeper with Jens Lehmann, a very good goalkeeper, and Philip Lahm maybe, but up front, okay, Miroslav Klose, okay. But the rest of the players, that he had Metzelder and Mertesacker at the back of the centre-backs, but he formed them into a unit. He made them superbly fit. He got them superbly fit. And they got the bronze medal at the World Championships. They finished third at the World Championships. And, so I don't think, comparing the Bundesliga with the German national team, I don't think that's a fair comparison, because the German national team is still pretty strong, as we saw last year. Whereas, you got the Premier League, which is the best in the world, probably the best league in the world, but, you got England struggling to make the finals of the European Championships. They probably do it now, thanks to Israel, but that's luck, basically, and they're just relying on third parties to help them out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Now, living in Germany and working in Germany for so long, what were your impressions of English football? Both, I guess, the 70s, 80s, and up to today's age?
Of English football? Well, to be honest, Chris, at that particular time when I was so much involved with the Bundesliga, I didn't take too much interest in English football. Because I was concentrating so much on the Bundesliga, and of course the Premier League, or the first division as it was, it didn't have the name and the reputation that it has today. So I was far more concentrated on German football. Since now I've basically 95% retired, I take a lot more interest in English football, and I also always followed the teams in the Champions League and so on, but I didn't sort of follow so much the development in the Premiership or in the Championship, what the old second division is, as it used to be.
Sure.
But I followed the progress of the English players who came to West Germany, as it was then, and notably Kevin Keegan. And I must tell you, this is probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I'll never forget, it was his last season with Hamburg, and they were playing at Leverkusen, and I went along there to do an interview with him, and he gave me over half hour of his time, talked about this, that, and the other, and I think it was before the European Championships in 1980, and he talked about the European Championships, he talked about the forthcoming European Cup final, when I think Hamburg just lost against Nottingham Forest 1-0. I think John Robertson got the goal for Nottingham Forest.
That's right.
And also about the Bundesliga. And he was fantastic. One of the nicest guys, I must admit, I've ever met in any sport. He was wonderful. But going, in those days, you could go out and talk to people. I met the late Bobby Moore, wonderful person. Interviewed him, talked to him. Wonderful, wonderful person. Also Franz Beckenbauer, in Germany, some of the Johann Neeskens and Cruyff and all. I think it was different in those days. Nowadays, you've got to go through an agent if you want to get with them.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah, they're going to say how much you want to get the interview, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I think even Pelé, still to this day, actually requests money for his interviews. So, what are your thoughts about the current state of German club football? Of course, in the Champions League.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, terrible. Yeah, except for Bayern Munich, of course, aren't in the Champions League this season. They only finished fourth in the Bundesliga last season. Only three clubs now, or two clubs qualify automatically from the Bundesliga, and the third has to qualify through a playoff. Bayern only finished fourth last season, and oh dear, it's not good internationally. That's the crazy thing. It's not good internationally for the German clubs. But it's good internationally for the German national team. I think there's still a lot England can learn from Germany in that respect. Not in club football, because there's so much money now in England club in the Premiership. They can afford to buy the best players, and if they've got good coaches, good managers. Although apart from Alex Ferguson, most of those are foreign as well, aren't they? You've got
Sure.
Yeah, you've got Arsene Wenger, who I think is probably one of the best managers in the world. You've got you had Jose Mourinho at Chelsea, and you've got Sven-Göran Eriksson at Manchester City. You've got Rafael Benitez at Liverpool. So, Fergie is also like Hamburg in the Bundesliga. Fergie is like the last of the dinosaurs in British management.
That's true. Yeah, very, very true. Now, do you ever get a chance to go back and watch any of the episodes of Soccer Made in Germany?
You mean some of the old? No,
Yeah.
I don't. No, I've got a couple of cassettes, VHS cassettes that not from way back when, but I've got a couple of when I was presenting German football, and I remember doing this thing. Going, it's a game you can watch, it's a game you can play, a game you could enjoy day after day. To the British, it's better than a nice cup of tea. I'm talking about soccer made in Germany. Every week on your PBS station, coast to coast, across the nation, Bayern, Hamburg, the best you can see if you keep on watching Soccer Made in Germany. Yeah. It was a good old day. I've still got that somewhere, yeah.
So what are your thoughts regarding the current state of commentators, like football commentators, compared back to like the 70s and 80s?
Ooh, I never like to criticize or judge my fellow people. I like Martin Tyler, must admit. Mm-hmm. I played soccer against Martin. I was playing for Deutsche Welle, and we played against London Weekend Television. And Martin, in those days, actually, was a writer with London in the sports department. He wasn't a commentator at all with London Weekend Television. And I was already commentating then. This was 1974, 75. And Martin was a good midfielder. He was long legs. He was like a giraffe. And then he was an intelligent guy, very intelligent, good. I would have thought at that particular time a good analyst. But then he went into commentating with Sky, especially, and he's done an excellent job. And what I liked right from the beginning, when he started commentating, he used to phone me up about pronunciations of German players and so on. Mm-hmm. And he was very thorough. He liked to get everything right, and I think Martin is a very, very good commentator. I like Martin very much. But Alan Clark is another one. Is it Alan Clark?
Alan Hansen? Maybe?
No, Alan Hansen, the Scottish guy. Yeah. Well, that's the difference. He doesn't comment. He doesn't do play-by-play. I mean, he's in the Gary Lineker roundup there. That's
right. Yeah.
I'm lucky that I can get Sky at my home in Germany, so I see that as well, and so. But I wouldn't want to criticize fellow commentators, and I'm sure they wouldn't want to criticize me. We all try and do the best job possible, and that's the thing. I mean, I think sometimes, especially the English commentators on England, not so much on the clubs, but on England, go a little bit over the board, especially the print media. They're the ones who annoy me the most. I mean, I recently read in one of the papers that, that we've got too many foreign players in England now, and that there's not enough talent, young talent coming through. Well, the following night, England under-21s played Bulgaria, won 2-0 in Milton Keynes, I think it was.
Yep.
And they in their group, which includes Portugal as well, they've played 5, won 5, haven't conceded a goal. And yet they say we haven't got enough young players coming through. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, and don't forget last year, they in this under-21 tournament, they played Holland in the final or semi-final. Holland went on to win it in Holland, and England were winning, the under-21s were winning 1-0 with about a minute remaining. Holland got the equaliser, and then won 13-12 on penalties.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so the under 21s prove they can take penalties as well, unlike their senior players.
It's interesting too, because like sometimes it's actually more entertaining to watch the under 21s than it is to watch the
but
national team.
That annoyed me so much, Chris. This article saying foreign players are ruining the English game. That's a load of rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could say foreign players are ruining the Spanish game or the Italian game or the German game. There are foreign players everywhere. And in England, they're lucky enough to have the best foreign players. But, you saw some wonderful talent out there for England. I mean, Walcott from Arsenal and so on, and Matt Derbyshire, Blackburn. They got some wonderful young players.
Absolutely.
Milner, another one. And so to say that there are no young players coming through, I think that's a load of rubbish. I think the print media, especially, it's the old motto that good news is not no news. Mm-hmm. So you look for bad news to print it, sort of thing, and they try to knock things much too often. Whereas the broadcast media, I think they are fairer. I honestly believe that.
Now, Toby, the last question I have is, what's the most interesting fact about you that the football fans would be surprised to hear?
I've only got 3 fingers on my right hand. I lost my little finger when I was 11 years of age. I don't know if that's it or not. I mean, got knocked off my bike by a bus, and I was only 11, so I wasn't drunk, Chris. I don't know. I was. Oh dear. That's a difficult question. As I say, I've been married 4 times, but this particular marriage now, it's our silver wedding this year. In a couple of weeks. In a couple of weeks' time, actually, the 20th of December. We got married in Las Vegas as well.
Okay, there you
go. 25 years ago. Yeah, and then and I don't know. I was actually my best sport. I was a fair enough soccer player, but I didn't play all that much soccer as a kid because I played rugby. I was a pretty good rugby player. Good cricketer. As I said, I played for Glamorgan Nomads, Glamorgan Seconds, and then and I was Welsh schoolboys champion over 440 yards. Huh. But I think I could have gone a long way as a track and field athlete if I hadn't discovered wine, women, and song. In those days, always beer, women, and song, not wine.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, Toby Charles, legendary football commentator and host of Soccer Made in Germany, thank you so much for being on the EPL Talk podcast.
Chris, thanks very much for asking me, and I appreciate the enthusiasm that the U.S. soccer fans have shown me over the years, and it's been wonderful to broadcast to the United States in the past, 25 years or 30 years as it is now.
That's right. Yeah, and actually in doing research for this interview too, I just came across so many stories from people that were growing up in the 70s and 80s, and just remembering vivid moments from some of the episodes. I think there was one episode where you had your poodle Fifi on the show.
Oh yeah, that was at the World Cup. Yeah, that was the World Cup 1982. Yeah, I had a little dog. That was Mosey. Okay. New York Mosey. That was the dog. I had the dog with me on the show. Yeah. Well, I was saying then that England had World Cup Willie, and Germany had Tip and Tap and all the rest of it. So I had my New York Mosey right in front of me, next to the microphone. Yeah, yeah, that's 25 years ago as well. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
So, it just goes to show, because I mean, everyone has very vivid memories, and so they definitely appreciate work as I do. And I appreciate Toby. Thank you so much for taking the time to do the interview.
Chris, thank you for phoning me up, and it's been very nice talking to you. Very enjoyable.
Likewise. Take care. All
Have
the best.
Have a good one now.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.